This list is going to be a good one with a lot of unique cards that have special powers, even the first legendary Vaporeon on it. It's definitely going to be an exciting segment, so let's get started with the Pokemon that caused some controversy back in the day.
41. Jinx. In the original card set, Jinx is more powerful than Mewtwo. Sad, but true. Although Jinx isn't nearly as strong as Mewtwo should have been, she's still one of the best cards to fill out your Psychic deck. Double Slap does what it promises. For a Psychic Energy, you get the chance to slap your opponent twice for 10 damage for each successful coin toss, meaning you're probably going to do 10. Against stronger cards, you have Meditate, which gets deadlier the more you hurt your opponent. While it costs a lot of energy, Jinx's first attack is cheap enough to buy time and add those damage counters you need to make Meditate good. However, bringing Jinx out as cleanup against an already injured opponent is a fantastic strategy. Meditate can also never hurt anything with a Psychic resistance that's not already damaged, which is a shame. However, for a basic Pokemon, she's a good card with a relatively high HP that can sway the match in your favor early on. 40. Golok. Golok actually managed to stand out in a game that has an abundance of water types. It works best in a Psychic and Water deck if it's one energy Side Shock move that buys some time to power up its second attack. Once it's ready, it can unleash Higher Beam and the opponent's energy cards dwindle. Higher Beam is definitely one of the best attacks in the card game. It can easily take a forgettable card and make it worth using. Golok's also got a decent enough HP, which makes it an underestimated water addition. Its Psychic attack is okay, but considering its best attack needs a water energy, it really only shines in either a Water Psychic or just Water deck. However, this duck definitely earns its gold star. 39. Charmeleon. Charmeleon is easily one of the best Pokemon with an evolution to follow in the original set. A high HP allows it to stick around longer than the Grass and Water Star second stages, and its attacks easily outclass theirs and many final stage Pokemon as well. Slash is solid for any deck as we run with every energy type and provides a quick, repercussion-free 30 damage. Flamethrower is a bit reckless and expensive with the Fire Energy discard, but it's also lethal so you can take out a Venusaur with one hit. Overall, Charmeleon does not mess around and has a proficient balance of strength and consistency. 38. Vaporeon. The second best evolution of the bunch. Vaporeon has the highest HP by 10, which is good, and a lower tree cost, which is even better. Quick Attack is not a horrible move considering it's at least easy to power up and can potentially do more damage per its energy cost, but it's not too strong or consistent. Water Gun is the card maker's favorite uninspired go-to attack. It does 30 base damage, and it's just as strong as Poliwrath, which is impressive. However, while Poliwrath has an amazing second move, Vaporeon has Quick Attack, which is useful in situations like when you're short on energy, but nowhere near as effective as Poliwrath's Whirlpool. Vaporeon is often overlooked because there are already a ton of water types to choose from, and Blastoise and Poliwrath are unarguably better. But aside from that, it's a sound choice, and even though it's painfully unoriginal, it would still pair and run well with Blastoise's Rain Dance. 37. Arcanine. Like Rhydon, Arcanine is one of those cards that seems amazing at first glance, but once you look at it more closely, you slowly become increasingly disappointed. Flamethrower is lethal if you can constantly sustain its energy cost keep using it. It ends up being its primary attack as it can KO most of the basic Pokemon. Takedown won't get you many uses and cost a ton of energy, but as a last-ditch effort, you'll be glad to have it because that 8 damage will go a long way. At least it doesn't take you with it like other self-destructive attacks, and Arcanine does have an exceptionally high HP, so it can dish it out and take it. It's definitely the fire type to consider if you're into swiping prizes quickly and easily, but keep in mind there's a few good reasons why it only has an uncommon rarity. 36. Dewgong. Like its first stage, it doesn't have originality in name or attacks, but still it's a rather impressive force. Dewgong has a 50 damage attack with 3 energies, which is quite deadly. Ice Beam isn't really worth the extra energy, even though it might paralyze the opponent, it does 20 damage less, so you're better off to stick with the Roar Beam and blasting your opponent until they're defeated. There are certainly some circumstances where Ice Beam is the better move, but for the most part, the extra 20 damage can be far more useful. Dewgong has a fairly high HP, but also a costly retreat cost. Still, it's definitely one of the best uncommon cards in the original set. So despite having far more strengths and weaknesses, you would think be ranked higher. Just like Flareon, the reason is there's a card superior to in nearly every way imaginable, and that's Gyarados. Has the same typing and attack structure, yet Gyarados has more powerful attacks, a higher HP, and even a resistance. So there's really no reason to choose Dewgong over Gyarados when it does everything it can do, only better. Although it's outclassed, Dewgong is still a good card, and even though it lives in Gyarados' shadow, it's still more than capable of seriously decimating the opponent. 35. Muck. Yuck, this card's a tough one to rank. Its Pokemon power is hit or miss depending on what you're facing. It would be idiotic to bring any other cards with Pokemon powers on your team, but if your opponent is running something that relies on it, then it's game-changing. Unfortunately, it's difficult to predict that, meaning it's mainly worth considering if you know what deck your opponent is running beforehand. Also, keep in mind there are only 22 cards with Pokemon powers in the original set, and some of them, like Ammonites and Mankeys, were not exactly contingent on your opponent winning or barely even worth preventing. However, if that's your strategy, keep Muck on your bench because it's better there than in the center stage. Its Sludge attack is decent and costs a fair amount to do 30 damage and maybe poison your opponent. All in all, if it only stopped enemy Pokemon powers, then it'd be awesome. But as is, it's an alright card, even if it has nothing to prevent. 34. Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl is most interesting in the mysterious fossil Pokemon and needs to be used carefully. Its Pokemon power requires some serious planning rounds. Aerodactyl has to be the only evolution card in your deck in order for it not to backfire. Fortunately, there are so many basic Pokemon that fill out your deck, and because Aerodactyl is the second stage, getting it active should be relatively easy. Once you have it on your bench, it has the ability to prevent all evolution cards from being played. The success of this power depends on their deck, so if they're running a deck with no evolutions, which was a fairly common occurrence, then it becomes pointless and a waste of bench space considering Aerodactyl isn't much of a fighter here, despite its love for the throat. With 60 HP, it's actually somewhat flimsy, and wing attack is simply alright, though it have having an all-colorless cost certainly helps. It's also the only fighting type with a fighting resistance, which is unique, and resistance is always a benefit. With a heavy retreat cost, decent HP, and a respectable attack, Aerodactyl is best suited on the bench. But whether or not it actually matters depends on your opponent, and if you face the right one, it could mean Aerodactyl becoming your most valuable card. 33. Ditto. Ditto is a tricky card to rank. It's the most original card, but also comes the least original because of what it does, transform. So once you play Ditto, it means it turns to an identical copy of the defending Pokemon. But the main positive is, Ditto has a Pokemon power to convert energy cards to whatever type you need, meaning it can potentially do some seriously lethal damage with 2 double colorless energies. The more power a defending Pokemon has, the stronger Ditto gets, and its chance of defeating your opponent become more likely than them knocking Ditto out. So in that regard, Ditto is much better than average because it's usually a superior copy towards anything it faces. However, Transform has its downsides. If it transforms to an insubstantial card like Magikarp or Squirtle, its chance of survival and winning won't be as great. Also, causing some status effects on it can immediately knock it out if it has 50 or more damage done to it. Same with force switching it to the bench. Even Muck is its most effective counter, making Ditto 100% worthless as it has no attacks if it can't transform. So Ditto is definitely a fun card to play as, but it can be quite the gamble. It's so unpredictable that it can either lead to extraordinary payoffs or devastating backfires, which means it's definitely high above average, but not something you want to rely on. 32. Zapdos. Zapdos had 2 variants in the original set, a fossil version and the base set one. I'll talk about both since they're each an interesting card and almost equal. Anyway, the first legendary bird on the list from the base set can either be an extremely effective killing machine or very pointless. First of all, it takes 4 energies to power up, mostly electric. Luckily it has a high HP to allow time for this, but still, getting 4 energies attached is usually a challenge. Once you have the energy, Zapdos can do some serious damage to the defending Pokemon and itself. The 30 damage itself is a serious risk, at least only a 50% chance of it. Thunderbolt can finish any job Thunder can is a tremendous last-ditch effort. However, its drawback means it's game over for Zapdos to be 100% defense, so you can't even store energy on it because all cards attached must be discarded, not just the ones used to power up the attack. So once you use Thunderbolt, Zapdos is stuck there unless you have a switch card because of its higher retreat cost. So while Zapdos is extremely fierce, it's also costly both energies and damage to self. The fossil version is a lot different and arguably slightly better. It's still self-destructive, Zapdos can't escape that, and it's still obnoxiously expensive. But having the opportunity to do relatively decent damage to bench Pokemon is a unique skill, although if everything goes wrong on a full bench means Zapdos takes 50 damage, leaving it open for a swift KO next turn. But the possibility of dealing 100 damage to an opponent's bench is a wonderful benefit. Although both Zapdoses require a lot of energy, they have high HPs, incredible damage output, no weaknesses, and resistance to the type they're supposed to have a weakness to, which means Zapdos could easily take a few blows before it gets powered up. Due to its potential power, one Zapdos in your electric deck is a necessity, but keep in mind its energy drains like a 1,000,000-watt air conditioner, so use with caution. The first legendary bird has been ranked, and there'll be another one next time. Tune into that segment to also see an appearance of what is usually considered one of the most popular and sought after Pokemon cards of all time. Try the new installment out shortly. See you then.